Joining me now is Atishi Marlena, Senior Minister, PWD and other portfolios in the Delhi government. Appreciate your joining us. Atishi, very straight question. Do you accept the view being expressed by the opposition in Delhi that the Delhi government was completely unprepared for the scale of flooding that has taken place? It reflects in that sense a lack of preparedness according to them.
See, Rajdeep, I think what we need to understand is that what has happened, the flooding of the Yamuna, doesn't actually have anything to do with the events that take place in Delhi. If, for example, rains come in Himachal Pradesh, the water from Himachal Pradesh flows into Haryana. When rains come in Haryana, the water from Himachal Pradesh and the rainfall that comes to Haryana then flows into the river Yamuna into Delhi. So the current situation that we are facing is basically because Delhi is further downstream from places that are facing an acute, almost climatic catastrophe. We have seen what has happened in Himachal Pradesh. We have seen the kind of flooding that has happened in Punjab. We have seen the kind of rainfall that has happened in Haryana. And that is the water that is flowing downstream. And once the water starts flowing from Himachal, Himachal can't stop it from going into Haryana. Once it flows into Haryana, Haryana can't stop it from flowing into Delhi. In fact, the Chief Minister spoke to Mr. Gajendra Singh Shekhawat, who when we had first reached out to them asking if they could hold the water in Hathni Kund, the Water Minister actually said that there is no reservoir at Hathni Kund. And so therefore, any water that comes into that barrage is going to be let flow towards the Yamuna into Delhi.
No, you're suggesting there's an inevitability about it. You're suggesting there's an inevitability about it, that there can be no human intervention. Is that what you're claiming? That there can be no human intervention when there is rainfall of this scale?
No, sir, but so Rajdeep, yes, Rajdeep, I think it's very clear what we are seeing over the past few years is a definite pattern of climate change. Even if you were to see rainfall patterns in Delhi, Delhi has 770 millimeters of rain over the entire monsoon. If you were to see over the past decade, not just Delhi, Haryana, Himachal, you see it across the country. What you now see is, earlier you used to have that entire rainfall spread out in small amounts over the entire monsoon. What you now see are very intense and very short spells. And you see this across the country. In fact, you're seeing these patterns across the world. Because these climate patterns have changed in the last decade, our country as a whole, Delhi will have to do something, Haryana will have to do something, Himachal will have to do something, with an effort that will have to be taken. Because now, according to these new climate patterns, governments will have to create very different kind of disaster management infrastructure. If you were to see Delhi, for example, in 1978, when the water rose to 207 meters, there was a flood across very large parts of the city in the low-lying areas. Today, water has risen almost more than a meter above that. And yet, there are far fewer areas that have water, because then very different kind of infrastructure development was decided. Like far bigger embankments on both sides of the river, barrages, etc. Now, these are not the kind of infrastructure you would build in the normal course of things. This is infrastructure that gets built to deal with natural catastrophe. And I think now with climate change happening, not just Delhi, I think everyone across the country and the world will have to prepare ourselves for these kind of extreme climatic events.
You know, the problem, Atishi, is you referred, for example, to 1978. The last time we saw rainfall of this scale in the national capital. The city's population then was about 6 to 7 million. Delhi's population, if I look at entire NCR, is now 25 million. You have number of people now living, more and more of them living along the banks of the Yamuna in some unauthorized constructions at times. You've got the increased pressure on land. You've got river erosion. The scale of the problem seems to have changed, but the responses don't seem to have changed. It's taken this kind of catastrophe for you to tell us today that now cities have to get adjusted to the climate emergency. It's almost as if it required this catastrophic level of rainfall for us to wake up.
No, I think you are, first of all, number one, 1978 did not even had much lesser rainfall than this. Let's be very clear. The kind of climatic events, not just Delhi, not just India, The whole world is seeing how climate patterns are changing, how you have intense climatic events, how the number of cyclones is growing, how the number of intense rainfall periods are growing, and this is a reality we have to accept, and this is a reality we have to prepare for, number one. Number two, floods in Delhi, the rising waters of the Yamuna, and this is very important to understand, have nothing at all to do with what happens in Delhi. The rising waters in the Yamuna have to do with what happens in Himachal Pradesh, have to do with what happens in Haryana. If, for example, there was flooding further down the Yamuna, downstream, then it will have to do with the extreme climatic events that take place in Delhi. Because ecosystems are not divided by political boundaries.
Sure.
This is one river basin that is going to get affected.
No, you make a note. No, Atishi, you make a good.
It has not rained in Delhi in the past 4 days, and yet the water level has been rising very steadily despite not a single drop of rain. So let's be very clear. The flood that has happened in Delhi has nothing to do with the rain in Delhi. It has nothing to do with the drainage in Delhi. You may ask a separate question that when it rains, why does water get logged in Delhi? Why are there times when traffic slows down? That is a separate question. Let us not conflate these two.
Okay, let's look at the two.
Flood is a separate issue that has to do with rains in Himachal and Haryana, and the second is the issue of city infrastructure. These are two separate issues. This is what we need to understand.
I take your point. Let's look at the two. Let's look at first, for example, as you said, flood waters in the Yamuna caused by heavy rainfall across North India, stretching from Himachal all the way to Delhi. You admit that we need to get better prepared for this because it could happen next year, it could happen every year. Is it possible for the 3 governments to sit together or the 4 governments to sit together of North India and work it out? Because I'll give you the example of pollution. Every year, as you know, what happens, in the months of October and November, we haven't got a plan in place that has brought all the governments together. Now, unless the governments are willing to sit across, are willing to prioritize this, is there a sense that you will have to prioritize the climate emergency and find ways in which flood control can be achieved? Maybe setting up, as you said, reservoirs if necessary, but you cannot have a situation like this happening every year now.
No, absolutely I agree, and if you were to see, Rajdeep, in the last 3 to 4 days, there has been seamless coordination between the states. There has been absolutely seamless coordination, not just with the states, but with the central government also. NDRF has been working with the disaster management units in Delhi seamlessly. Today, if you were to actually go into one of the evacuation areas, if you were to go into the relief camps, you would not know who is working for the Delhi administration, who is working for the NDRF, because there is a combined effort.
No, that's
not just that. It is not just the state government. Even with Haryana, we have been in constant touch with Haryana. So I'm saying that, see, so Rajdeep, let's look at it one thing at a time. We have faced an acute climatic condition for the first time in 40 years, number one. During this entire crisis, there has not been one instance where there has been any fight between Delhi and Haryana, between Delhi and the central government. We have been in touch with the Central Water Commission every day. We have been in touch with the Met Department. We have been in touch with Haryana. We have been in touch with Irrigation Department of Haryana, Irrigation Department of UP. Let me tell you, you won't even know this, but all the barrages in the Yamuna that today are being worked upon to make sure that there is not a single stoppage of water, Irrigation Flood Control Department from Delhi, the Indian Army, NDRF, Haryana, everyone is working together seamlessly to ensure that the situation gets solved as soon as possible. So let me assure you that everyone has been working together, because at the end of the day, it is the interests of the people of Delhi that are most important. In fact, I would even like to thank the people of Delhi. So many people have come forward to help in the relief camps.
Ma'am, I ask you, how will you prevent it next time? Since you've accepted an inevitability, given the situation as it exists today, how do we prevent it tomorrow?
I think there's several things that need to be done. Yes. I think several things need to be done. First of all, I think there is definitely a lot of data in our system regarding climate patterns, satellite data, regarding water flows, etc. I think definitely some kind of special purpose vehicle needs to be set up for North India to understand this, to be able to predict the amount of rains that are likely to happen, because we do have data coming in from multiple sources. So I think that is number one, because I think that is what will be predictive in terms of when the weather patterns can create this problem. Number two, now we do know the fact that this kind of intense rainfall will happen. Of course, all states will have to divert their budgets to creating even greater embankments, barrages, etc., which of course will take away money from development works that could have been done elsewhere. But now that we know that we are facing this kind of potential weather emergencies, climate emergencies, all states will have to divert some of their funds to ensure that we can have preventive, be it barrages, be it reservoirs, be it diversions, bigger embankments, etc. So working with engineers and working with environmentalists at the same time to ensure that we can have the best possible protection even against climatic
So are you giving me an assurance in conclusion that this will be prioritized, that over the next year this issue of a climate emergency will be top of the mind? Because we've seen it, it's never been an election issue. It needs to perhaps be put top of your at least policy agenda now. There are lakhs of people who live along the banks of the Yamuna who are suffering now every year.
No, there's Rajdeep, I can definitely say that we have never shirked away from things that are not election issues. Till Aam Aadmi Party came to power in Delhi, education was never an election issue. Government schools were never an election issue. Government primary health centers, mohalla clinics were never an election issue. But if something needs to be done, it needs to be done. And given the fact that the safety of the people of Delhi is under question here, this is something that we will definitely prioritize.
May I just ask you also in conclusion, are you hopeful that the worst is over, given the fact that rains have slightly receded in the last 24 hours, 48 hours, even in the hills?
No, I know we are quite hopeful also, because almost from 1 p.m. today, water levels do not seem to be rising. I think that the worst in terms of the amount of water that came from Hathni Kund to the Yamuna river in Delhi, most of that seems to have passed through. So water levels have stabilized. Hopefully through the night they might even start coming down. Let us, I think at this point of time, hope that in the next couple of days we don't have heavy rains, because if heavy rains come even with a gap of a few days, at least this entire water would have flown further down the Yamuna and we would have more bandwidth to deal with any surge in the river.
Okay, let me leave it there. I know, Atishi, you've been in and around relief camps all through the day and you've been monitoring the situation. I appreciate you taking the time off. Let's hope that this is a wake-up call to your government and indeed most governments, particularly in North India. Thanks very much for joining me on the news today.